Meeting to order and have a roll call.
Chair Bale,
Present.
Regent Ball, Regent Brinkley,
Present.
Regent Bobby,
Present.
Regent Dennison,
Present.
Vice Chair Milligan,
Present.
Regent Nichols,
Present.
Regent Thomas,
Present.
Best, Regent Warrenbell.
Present.
We have 9 regents present. Representing quorum of the board, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Our first item on the agenda is our Academic Affairs Committee, and we have Chair Milliken here with us today. We're very happy about. For those who don't know, he was in a car accident recently, and he's back on the mend.
Thank you. Thank you. Our first item on our agenda for this committee is the appointment of emeritus status. And I call on Dr. Rob Hale for a presentation.
Thank you, sir. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 faculty. It's a little bit lighter list this time because we didn't have another graduate round. But it's a great list of folks who have committed their careers to this place and have done outstanding work for WKU. As you all know, this is the first crack at approving them. We'll hear about them again at the main meeting in December, and that's when it becomes official. But we have Doris Sakura, who's an associate professor of applied human sciences. We have Dr. Steve Spencer, who's a professor of kinesiology and recreation and sport. Dr. Katie Algio, who's a professor of earth and environmental and atmospheric sciences. And there was a correction on the original agenda. There was a typo that she had been listed for distinguished professor, but this is just another emeritus appointment. And then Dr. Theodore Ted Hovitt from the professor of English, and Dr. Glenn LaFantasy, professor of history. So all 5 of these folks are outstanding. And when Provost Fisher comes back in December, he'll give you the full story on these folks, but I'm happy to answer any questions about them if you like.
Hearing no questions, we'll entertain a motion for approval of emeritus status for these recommended individuals.
So
All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
We'll note that Regent Nichols has joined us. Good morning, George.
Good morning, and I apologize for being late. I wish I were there.
Next week.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited.
The next item is an information item, and I understand you may have something further about that, sir.
yes, sir. So I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Rachel Tenius, who's an associate professor at WKU. She's a former 2-sport athlete at WKU in soccer and track, where she obtained her undergraduate and master's degrees in exercise science. She then moved back to her hometown in St. Louis, Missouri, and obtained a second master's degree in science and clinical investigation and a PhD in movement science at Washington University School of Medicine. While at WashU, she began her work investigating the role of obesity, physical activity, and maternal metabolic health on maternal and infant outcomes. Since returning to WKU as faculty, she's secured continuous, and I do mean continuous, external funding through the Kentucky INBRE network and the NIH to study physical activity during pregnancy and postpartum. She's become most interested in developing physical activity interventions as a means of improving pregnancy-related outcomes, particularly in underserved populations. Her most recent work has been devoted to the development of a mobile app, Bumped Up, BUMPTUP, which is designed to increase physical activity levels among pregnant and postpartum women. Most recently, Dr. Tenius has formed a company wearing a new hat of CEO as she starts the process of app commercialization. Her personal life and research interests have intersected for much of the past 6 years, as she has a 6-year-old, Lainey, a 4-year-old, Riley, and a 1-year-old, Tess. So Dr. Tenius is going to summarize her early work and how it led her down the path of innovation to create Bumped Up. This a mobile health application designed to increase physical activity levels and combat obesity, as well as other downstream outcomes among pregnant and postpartum. So I'll stop there and invite Dr. Tenius to step up.
Mr. Chair, as Rachel makes her way up, I'll say this is going to be the inaugural in a series of faculty joining us to talk about their work. I know you all are taken by our student experience, and I thought it made good sense for us to hear from our faculty. What's interesting, and Rachel doesn't know this, I knew about her research and the work that she did as faculty member. I had no idea that she was a soccer alumna as well until we were at a soccer game earlier in the semester with her two young charges and husband. It was and so that's glad to have you here. I look forward to the Regents learning about your work, but we're going to do this each meeting, hear from a faculty member what they've done with their careers and why and how they got to the point. So Rachel, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I promise to keep it under 10 minutes, so don't worry. But yeah, I want to share with you a little bit about the app that we're developing and kind of the path that's led us here, but I promise to move through quick. There we go. All right, so what is the problem that my research ultimately attempts to solve? And it's the one of maternal morbidity and mortality. So as you can see from the CDC figure here, the maternal morbidity and mortality rate in the United States far outstrips other industrialized nations, as you can see by that high red bar there. And so a lot of people ask, well, why is that? Why is our maternal mortality rate so much higher? It has a lot to do with so many women in the United States present for prenatal care with other underlying health conditions. A big one being obesity. Over 1/3 of all pregnant women enter pregnancy obese. And so the OB that I go to actually says it's kind of like when the pregnant woman's that's obese, it's like asking a pilot to fly in a storm. You kind of know that we're heading into a potentially risky pregnancy. Other conditions that are related to obesity, preeclampsia, high blood pressure during pregnancy, gestational diabetes, and then a big one is also poor mental health, which is contributing to these numbers. So doctors everywhere, public health experts are trying to figure out how do we solve this problem? We have this major public health crisis in the United States. And they're looking for the magic pills and the solutions. And of course, I'm biased. I'm an exercise physiologist, but I'm like, we have it. It's exercise. Exercise helps with every one of those conditions that I just named. It lowers weight gain during pregnancy. It helps reduce blood pressure. It lowers insulin resistance. And also has been shown to be very effective for helping with depression and anxiety. But this introduces another problem. Only 15% of pregnant women actually achieve exercise guidelines. And honestly, that's probably low. That's based on self-report, and people are a little more likely to report that they're more active than they really are. So again, another problem introduced here. And then of course, in underserved populations, that number is going to be even lower. So I've really been thinking about this for a long time. This was a paper that it was published when I started here, but it was something I've been working on throughout my dissertation work at WashU. Looking at just this, so the top, and it's okay that you can't see it, it's not particularly relevant, but so many things, so many risks for both mom and baby when you're obese during pregnancy. But on the bottom, what you can see is that physical activity during pregnancy really helps to fix or treat almost all of those things. So again, and all of that can help lower, if we can get moms active, even if they're overweight or obese, we can help improve outcomes. So this, again, something I've been interested in for quite a while. My dissertation work focused on lipid metabolism and inflammation. I threw a bunch of figures up here. What the data says is not important, but I really started my career doing more bench work and mechanistic work and started realizing that my passion lied more in community impact. And it took too long to see it actually impact a person. And so this was some of my early work looking at metabolism during pregnancy, particularly among obese women, of course, seeing that it's dysfunctional and that causes a lot of downstream unfavorable outcomes. And then a little bit later, my dissertation work, I started asking questions, but what if they're obese but also active? Does that help negate some of these outcomes? And sure enough, it did. This is just one figure showing inflammation, very simple, but you get the idea. Even in the presence of obesity, if we can be active, we can improve a lot of outcomes. This just being one of them. So all of this taken together, I started kind of seeing another problem. So we were spending these metabolic visits, we were spending 5 and 6 hours just sitting in the lab, talking to pregnant women, working with them. And I started hearing some really interesting things anecdotally. Like a lot of people would say things like, oh yeah, my doctor never talked about activity with me. Or, it never came up, or he told me my heart rate can't get over 130, which is just not good information. I had one postpartum mom tell me My doctor said it would affect my milk supply, so I didn't exercise for 2 years because I breastfed for 2 years. I was like, oh my gosh. So I started realizing there's a lot of other problems here. There's a patient-provider communication issue as well. Don't have time to share it, but we took that anecdotal assessment and we also published some papers on that. We asked physicians, what are you saying to your patients? We asked patients, what are you hearing? Found a lot of disconnect and a lot of bad information going. So how do we solve these problems? My bias would certainly be, why don't we integrate an exercise expert into the healthcare team? We do it with dietitians. Why aren't we putting an expert exercise person on that team? But it's complicated. It involves insurance. It's not going to happen anytime really soon. Those things just take a while. So the next thing in my mind is, well, we need really good evidence-based interventions that are sustainable, that can be used widely, that gives providers a resource so the burden's not falling on them. Providers, as you probably are aware of, really don't have exercise training. Even if a patient said, hey, okay, I want to exercise, what should I do? They're like, not sure what to tell you. Keep moving. That's the kind of stuff that they say. They're amazing. Providers are amazing, but they don't have the training to do exercise prescriptions. So that's what I decided to do, is start looking at how can we develop interventions that could be sustainable and be a resource to both the patient and the provider. And when I first started this was several years ago. This was here at WKU when I first got here. A big thing for me was, how do we if we can at least overcome some of like myths that permeate culture, that would be a huge start. And I can never present ever without showing this, because to me it just drives home the point of there's a lot of bad information out there. One being these special parking spots, like a pregnant woman shouldn't be able to walk from her car to the grocery store, right? So you see what I'm working against here, right? There's a lot of we got a lot of current to push against. So when I first got here, I decided, let's do just a really simple intervention in the community. Let's give women education for one, and then let's also give them access. Let's pick out a bunch of workout places in town, let them work out there for free. Let's see what happens. So that was the first kind of intervention that we did here at WKU. Won't go through the details of it, but ultimately half the group got these half the study got the educational resources and the access. The other half just had their standard of care. And what we found, it was successful. Ultimately, nearly half of the intervention group did take us up and actually use those resources. So I thought, hey, that's a win. Again, I'm not going to get into the details of the figures, but we were able to reduce the time spent sedentary in that intervention group. So again, a small win. We improved self-efficacy for exercise. So the women who were in that intervention group felt more confident exercising during pregnancy, which is also a win. But even after the study, it was, we had some statistical significance. We were able to publish, but I still just felt like, I don't know, like it was statistically significant, but is this really clinically impactful? And so I started thinking more and more about, how do we really reach pregnant women? And that's where the whole idea came, their phone. When they come in for these visits, they're glued to their phone. They're always, they love pregnancy apps already. That's a huge market. So started thinking through that. And as most people in here are probably aware of, mobile health technology is huge. 96% of pregnant women in the United States already have a smartphone. They're already using it. The majority of pregnant postpartum women already have at least one pregnancy-related app. It's the medical condition with the highest number of apps. So a lot of interest there. And of course, apps, they're engaging, they're interactive, they utilize real-life settings, which is great for sustainability. And they're also accessible no matter what your geographic location or your socioeconomic status is. So that's where the whole idea for Bumped Up was born, pun intended. So there are lots of fitness apps on the market, but they do not tailor any information to pregnant women. So pregnant women, even really educated ones, use them. And then when they get pregnant, they kind of throw their hands up. I don't know, can I still do this? What can I still do? They don't have that information. Like I said, there are a lot of pregnancy apps, but they're very light on physical activity content. Even the very best apps out there have very little on physical activity. So that's where the whole idea was born, and that's the gap that we're seeking to fill. Just a quick little visual of what it looks like a little bit. But an evidence-based physical activity app delivered through that mobile technology, and everything is designed by certified professionals, which really helps us to distinguish ourselves from anything else that's out there. And again, it's designed specifically for that pregnant and postpartum population. Oh, I don't know what happened there. Didn't do that. Hold on. There we go. So like I said, all content's evidence-based. We've done a clinical trial. I'll show you like a quick snapshot of that in a second. Continuing to try to ensure that the app itself is evidence-based, which is again, a way that we're distinguishing ourselves. Really hoping to close the gap with marginalized group. Let this be a resource that anybody can access. It's not just for the wealthy women that can afford the gym membership. This is for everybody. And all of our features are unique and they're directly influenced by stakeholders. So before, this is a whole nother conversation, but we did tons of customer discovery. We also did lots of focus groups and one-on-one interviews with patients that are both pregnant and postpartum, and also providers to ask what does this app need to have for it to be effective. So that's where all of the ideas for the app came from. And then also the app continues into postpartum. So most apps right now, the baby apps or the pregnancy apps, when mom's has the baby, the app says, congratulations, download the baby app now, and it drops the mom. So we are very deliberate to say, hey, we're going to keep you. We're going to help you get through these early weeks and transition you back to being active so that you can continue to be active after the baby's born. All right, so we did do a quick pilot trial. We actually just published this 2 weeks ago. So small study, 38 women, just really testing to see if there's potential for promise here. And as you can see, they were randomized kind of midway through the pregnancy, followed throughout. We had phone check-ins. Half the women had access to the app. The other half actually had the educational brochure from the earlier study that I mentioned. And so we followed them then through 12 weeks postpartum. And what we found, this is moderate to vigorous physical activity, a very standardized measured in our field. The intervention group was much better able to maintain their activity when they had access to the app. And you can see that drop in the control group. They became less active, which is what you expect to see during pregnancy. People tend to become more active or less active, excuse me. But the fact that our intervention group was able to maintain and actually increase was really exciting. And then in a similar vein, we saw the same kind of thing with self-efficacy. And this was actually statistically significant, which was exciting given that it was such a small sample size, that they were better able to maintain that self-efficacy for exercise when compared to the control counterparts. Slight delay on this. All right, so a couple quick hits as I wrap up here. Intellectual property for the app. So we did just recently receive our copyright protection of the app. So the US federal trademark. We also have had, so up to date, we've had 3 NIH grants that have covered a lot of the data that went into creating it, and then also actually the development itself. A couple others are in the queue. Social Impact Award, we won one of those this spring, which was exciting. Some key presentations have been presented at ACSM, which is kind of the main conference that I traveled to. We actually were asked to present to the CDC earlier this spring, so that was very exciting. And then some other universities, their obstetrics departments have asked me to come present to them. So that's been exciting and really cool opportunities there. The doctors are like chomping at the bit for this. They're ready for it. Like, we're soon, we're getting there. So all very exciting stuff. So what's next? We did a pilot, which has been awesome, but of course we have a lot of refinement and feedback that we received from that process. So, and anyone that's done app development knows it's very expensive. So we have some work to do to try to really take the app itself to the next level. I do want to do a larger randomized controlled clinical trial. So waiting for funding for that to kick in. So hopefully we can start that. And as mentioned, we are starting a company. So we are officially going to try to get it onto the market so we can start generating some revenue so that we can work on those refinements over time with that. And of course, always looking to partner, gain endorsements, license. That's kind of the direction a lot of it's going. So not going to go into detail. Lots of people have played a role in this. So just want to make sure that I took a second to acknowledge all the wonderful people that have helped me along the way. Company formation, of course, we've got board of directors, advisory board, Buddy's here. He's of course been a huge help. So I will stop there, but thank you so much for the opportunity to be here to present to you. And of course, contact information is there, and always open to questions, feedback, comments, or any ideas that you'll have.
This is terrific.
Thank you.
So I wonder, do the grants paid for the app, or is there a fee that they have to pay to have the app?
For the users?
Yes, for the user. So
Yeah.
it's free for so long and then you have to pay? Or...
Yeah, good question. So the plan is, so it's not commercially available yet, but the plan is to have a free week so everyone can try it. And hopefully it's so good that they're going to, of course, want to keep using it. There'll be a free version with ads in it to start with. And then there'll be a version without ads. That'll be $4.99 a month, a subscription model. And then we also really we're trying to come up with another strategy too, where if you want to pay, if you can pay with the means to pay $10 a month, you could actually buy it for somebody else who needs it. So kind of like Tom's Shoes, like a 1-for-1, kind of that social impact, sort of pull at the heartstrings of some of the women who can afford it. That's another strategy that we're gonna probably try to take to get some more traction.
When do you expect it to be commercially available?
We're hoping early 2023. That's the hope. Yep. Company formation's like happening like as we speak. So I have about $100,000 worth of refinements that I need to get done to get it to the market. But we're getting there.
Great presentation and great to have faculty here. And I'm excited for future faculty members, although it'll be hard to top this in terms of real life stuff. And evidence-based medicine, for those who may not be familiar with that term, is really the gold standard today that you reach for, and randomized controlled trials are the best information you can get to make those decisions. But there's all kinds of stuff that you can think of with this, and inflammation, which we know now is at the root of most disease processes, certainly cardiovascular disease. I wonder if you could take even just the gestational diabetics and incorporate some means of judging inflammation in it. That would be really good information.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or whatever in that group particularly. But it's exciting, and this university should be about.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, we have plans for that. That specific thing. We really want to start to be able to at some point tailor it to any conditions that you have. So if you self-report that you have gestational diabetes or a high inflammatory profile, we can tailor the content and there's educational articles they get, things like that, to really tailor it to those conditions. It doesn't do that yet, but we have a long list of to-dos. It's just expensive.
Recently in the news has been about pregnant women who have COVID. And of course, they're seeing complications from that. And that'd be another group you could take with this, and I'm sure see some meaningful data from. COVID's not one of what.
Well, I'm thankful for Rachel being here. She is an exemplar of what we hope for all of our faculty, both the work that she's done, the importance of her work in the real world. So when we talk about applied research, this is a great example of it, in addition to some of the basic research that undergirds it, the kind of work that our faculty do. Also, her remarkable track record of sponsored inquiry. She has been one of our most successful grant getters from the places that we want to get grants. NIH is important for us as an institution as we continue to grow our research portfolio and move toward R2 status as an institution. So this will be the first of many. But the last thing that Rachel does is collaborates with our innovation campus and Buddy Steve, from whom you'll hear later in the meeting. So Rachel, it's a chance for me to say thank you for all of your work in front of everyone. Thank you for inspiring the next generation of Hilltoppers. And I'm glad you came home for the Hill.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you, Dr. Pettis, for a great presentation. Thank you for your good work. With that, we yield back to the chair.
All right. Well, our next item is Finance and Budget Committee, and I'll ask Regent West.
We have 3 action items on the agenda today, so Susan.
So Jeff, if you can pull up the.
Oh, I did. Let me mention too, Regent Ball joined us somewhere early, I think, in that presentation. So Linda, it's great to have you with us.
Good morning. Sorry I was late.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. The first agenda item is the approval of personnel actions. Personnel actions going from July 1 to the end of September, and then the one-time compensation payment going from again the beginning of July through the end of September. These are your typical that we bring to the board every quarter. We did get a replacement from Beth, and I believe yesterday it was posted. What we discovered in one of our meetings, I guess it was with Regents Speller and Regents Brody was there was a programming error in some new software we implemented, and we corrected the report. There was no problem in payments. It was just a reporting error.
Anybody have any questions? No questions. I will take a motion to approve faculty and staff personnel actions.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the motion passes. On to the second item on the agenda. Okay, we'll redo the motion because we have only committee members that can motion and second. So do I have a motion from a member of the Finance and Budget Committee to approve the personnel actions?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Sometimes we forget these are committee meetings. We think we're in the regular board. This is committee meetings only today.
Okay, the second agenda item would be the approval of the budget versus actual report for the first quarter. And let me just take you through some of the highlights on the revenue side and highlights on the expenditure side. So looking at your total revenues, we're at 38% of the total budget. Net tuition revenue at 47% of the total budget. And the smaller revenue items, your state appropriation, grants and contracts, other revenue, auxiliary sales and service, about 32% of budget. So if you look at that, I know those numbers are small, but I wanted to put the report up here. Remember that now in the world of finance within higher education, we focus on net tuition revenue. That's the important gauge for universities. So if you look at the net tuition revenue line, there's actually good news here. So we're actually up 1 percentage point from last year. So we stand at 47% of budget, whereas last year we were at 46% of budget. So that's a good news story for the university. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions. This is the non-tuition revenue item. So state appropriation was up about 2.2 million for the quarter. That's due to the increase in appropriation that you saw when we presented the budget back in May and June. Grants and contracts, that's the significant decline on the revenue side. And that's not associated with grants and contracts that our faculty members bring in. That is simply related to the decrease in the federal and state funding for CARES. That we saw the big increase during the COVID period. And your other revenue, auxiliary sales and services, consistent with the prior year with some timing issues. I know people say, why do you finance people always talk about timing, but it is important because you receive some payments maybe in September, and then the next year they come in early October. So that's simply what we mean by timing. Any questions on the revenue side? Okay, turning to the expense side then, expenses are about 31, total are about 31% of the total budget. Personnel is about 23% of the total budget, and your direct expenditure is about 42% of the total budget. Looking at the largest side of the expenditure equation would be our personnel expenditures. So you can see we're up slightly, 23% as compared to last year at 22%. And that can be explained directly to the salary increase that went into effect in January. And your direct expenditures, I know there's a lot of numbers there, as Melissa pointed out to me. Supplies and expense of 11.9 is compared to 10.3 million last year is again a timing issue related to some rent payments that were recorded later in fiscal year 22. The rest of the increases, other than, I think it's fair to say travel, and that's really because our faculty are traveling again now that the COVID restrictions have been released. Most of them, unfortunately, are related to inflationary increases. And as we presented to you in the budget, we knew this was going to happen. I mean, we see it in our personal daily finances. We're hopeful that inflation for all of us will get under control soon, but that's where most of the increases were from. Yeah. So that's it on the budget versus actual.
Does anybody have any questions or?
So this is our first opportunity this year to get some sense of our health based upon enrollment and how we did on this last year. Do we have any comments? Or, I mean, obviously, as you're saying, the net tuition revenue is up as a percentage of our budget over last year.
So I appreciate the incessant focus on headcount that everyone asked about. It's important. We were a little bit under the target for the first year class, a little bit up in retention. And so what you see, though, is the number that matters is how much revenue do you generate from the students that you enroll. We're still working out of the system, some smaller classes. We continue to have an aggressive recruitment target of about 3,100 students. What we hope happens is that we retain more of them. We get closer to that target each year. But at the end of the day, if we're generating additional revenue from those students, that's the win, which that creates the budget stability that we need. You all remember sometimes focusing on headcount creates perverse incentives to balloon that number in ways that are unhealthy. And so I think that what we've done is try to be as honest with ourselves and everyone else about what the actual first year number is, continuing numbers are. And if we add every flavor of student in to get to some larger number, that we don't use that for budgeting. And so we're at about 17,000 total students today. That's a healthy number for our institution. And we're going to continue to have incremental growth, I think, in that first year class. And as smaller classes work their way out, we continue to grow. But at the end of the day, a 1% variance in the budget would be $3 million. And what it looks like to me is about a $1 million variance in the budget. That means our projections are right on target. I wish the variance would be up instead of down, but the reality is you're within that margin of error. We're clicking along exactly as we should. But thank you for the opportunity. And the official enrollment numbers, I think CPE doesn't release those until later in the semester.
Might be a good time just to mention what the regional strategy is. And we had an event yesterday in Glasgow that was very well attended with an exciting presentation by our president.
Well, it's we have students from every county in the Commonwealth, and we'll continue to do that and recruit across the state. But we also have to pay particular attention to those young people in our backyard. So yesterday on the 20th anniversary and celebrating that of the Glasgow campus, we announced a new initiative, Early College at WKU in Glasgow, where we will work to recruit students from 7 schools from the Barron County region and to the east for them to partner with WKU. So juniors and seniors will begin their WKU college career while they're still in high school. So for the 100 or so students who begin that program next fall, they will spend a half day in their home high school and a half day here on our campus in Glasgow, taking courses alongside other students. And so when you think about what that does, number one, it means when they graduate from high school, they also will be graduating with 1 year of WKU coursework under their belts. So that is a success. Number two, given that they started with us, the hope is that they will continue with WKU for their undergraduate careers, either in Glasgow on the main campus or online. And then I think the third thing it does is it's a commitment to ensuring that every student knows that this experience is affordable and accessible to them. We know in those counties, or at least in the Commonwealth, less than 50% of high school students actually attempt something after high school. And the reason many of them don't is because they say it's too expensive. We also know that 53% of the students in those high schools are Pell eligible, which means if they have a 3.0, they're eligible for free tuition at WKU. And we need to help them understand what that means, not just for their high school experience, but for their life after high school. And so and another important effort to grow that pipeline. I have to, since we're talking about recruitment and my colleagues are here, and as is Ethan, I have to thank enrollment management, but in particular, our colleges and other affiliated organizations who have been barnstorming the state. We've had 10 Discover WKU events with alumni participating, prospective students and their families, each one of the colleges and their representatives and other information providers, so that they hear a little bit from the university, president or Ethan. They hear from our financial aid office, and then they spend time with the colleges they want to enroll in when they get here. And so we've seen a great interest in that. We've expanded it year over year. And the depth of interaction with our deans, we think, is going to be a powerful motivator to enrollment. And so continue that work. We're going to have some second tier events. So we have 10 full scale, some more that are in smaller markets for us that don't have the full blown show, but we've been keeping a bus tour company in operation this year. At some point, we might have to get our own big red bus to drive around instead of paying somebody else. It's been a great recruitment season. It continues. We press hard. We have a Head for the Hill event in a couple of weeks. We had one just a week or so with 1,000 plus guests on campus with a similar type of activity. And so all signs are pointing toward certainly an uptick, not just in prospects, but also inquiries as well. So now our goal is to convert inquiries into applications and get those applications through the system.
Yes, great. I think
It's a
potential
long
to impact
answer
these
for it.
numbers is great, and for many people, that's a game changer.
Got some good press on that event in Glasgow, I thought.
It was terrific.
Yeah, I was well pleased with that.
Speaking of press, I don't know if any of you have seen it. We've also been doing a co-aligned media tour. So I've been on the news in Louisville a few times, Lexington. I'll be in Evansville. I was in Nashville. So again, this is a multi-layered strategy. You want the boots on the ground, but also some air cover as well, to use the military example.
Sounds terrific. Anybody else have any other comments?
I did have a follow-up question, but I didn't want to take anybody else's time, if it's okay. I just, on the inflationary pressures, which we talked about heading into this year, many of us attended the CPE training, the trusteeship training, and listening to Dr. Thompson's emphasis on student affordability. And we've talked here about the impact on inflation on the budgets of the people who work for us, but there's also a decrease in the spending power of our own budget. Know what might be allowed in terms of tuition.
Yeah, that's a great question, Shane. And so the process we typically use is the presidents will begin, CPE presidents of the public universities will begin that conversation in November. We've had informal conversations, obviously, at the conference and other times. But it is about a 6-month process. We won't know with any certainty what the parameters are from CPE until usually April is when we get that information. Now, time for lots of different reasons, some technical, some political. But last year, or 2 years ago, when we were having the tuition setting conversation, I remember it set for 2 years at the time. One of my colleagues was very clear that if inflation reared its ugly head and has done and did what it has done, that we were hopeful that the CPE would be at least willing to entertain some additional flexibility around tuition setting. given the makeup of CPE and what we've heard and seen, and rightfully so, they are concerned about affordability for our students. At the same time, we have to be able to literally keep the lights on, air condition the buildings. And if that is going up exponentially, then those costs, some portion of them, we hopefully will pass some of that on. Same time, you don't want to balance the budget on the backs of students and their families. And so I think it would be a balancing act between those two things, maintaining affordability, allowing us to deal with inflation. But as Susan said, the real hope is that if the Fed actions begin to take hold, pull that number down a little bit, you get a bit of relief. The challenge with inflation is that even if you bring it down year over year, the prices aren't going to come back. So it's baked in.
So Shane, just to follow up, since the decision would be made so late in the CPE level, what we have to do in the budget process is actually build multiple scenarios as far, and our new software allows us to do that. So.
Questions, comments? Right, hearing none, I will call for a motion to accept for filing the statement of revenues and expenditures for the 3 months ended September 30, 2022 and 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
So the final item is the renewal of the Truist Bank line of credit. And I just want to remind everyone, this is simply a renewal, because I know when we did this last year, there was a lot of publicity around it being a new line of credit. So this is not a new line of credit. It's just the renewal. It's a 1-year cycle. It has to be renewed every year. Again, just a reminder, this is a best practice for higher education institutions or corporations for that matter. And it's just there as a safety net. If something drastic might happen, you would have access to $10 million. It will, the term of the obligation is through June 30th of next year. And given our cash position, given what we've done over the past couple of years, we have no anticipation of tapping in to that line of credit. Again, just a safety net.
Anybody have any questions about the renewal of the line of credit or comments? Then I will call for a motion to approve the board resolution for renewal of the line of credit with Truist Bank. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion passes. I believe that's all we have for finance from Susan, is that right? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Rest. Everybody okay to proceed on? All right. We'll move on to the Student Affairs Committee, and just to be clear, the members of that committee, everyone's here. Linda Ball, George Nichols, Melissa Dennison, Student Rep Cole, and the chair, Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Bell. We have one information item on the agenda for student affairs this morning. And that's a student presentation, and I'm going to ask Dr. Lumpkin to introduce that presentation.
Bringing them in just for a moment.
It's really nice to have faculty and students part of our meetings. Welcome. Nothing to be afraid of. Maybe Halloween.
Thank you, Regent Thomas, and thank you to the board for this opportunity to highlight some of our students in this particular student organization, OLAS, who is going to be telling you a little bit about their programs and their experiences today. We're coming right off the end of Hispanic Cultural Heritage Month, September 15th through October 15th, which is a wonderfully placed recognition and cultural observation, since it is butted up against the historic 16 de septiembre, the Grito of Independence in Mexico. So there is the reason why we have that 15th to the 15th to the 1st. So this is the OLAS group, and I have some wonderful representatives here today that I'd love to introduce to you. Abner Rubio from right here from Bowling Green, who's a senior nursing major and the vice president of OLAS. Emily Ten Torres, who is from the Dominican Republic, junior majoring in international business and Spanish, and she's the membership coordinator for OLAS. And Jenny Tovar from Nashville, Tennessee, who's a senior majoring in political science and international affairs, public relations officer for OLAS, and social media marketing intern and navigator for our one and only ISEC. So these students represent this organization, the Hilltopper Organization of Latin American Students, and I'd love for them to tell you a little bit about their organization.
So hello, everybody. First of all, we want to thank you guys. Thank you to the board for allowing us to be here today and presenting. Thank you to Dr. Logan for helping us out. Yes, so we are OLAS, the Hilltopper Organization of Latin American Students. We recently just took this picture outside with our little flags representing our colleges with some of our members. Yes, so OLAS, we were established in 2011. We were established to promote the needs of Latin American students here on Western's campus. We took a brief hiatus. We came back in 2012, and we just recently celebrated our 10-year anniversary. As you can see here, we had original members come, original exec members come, the very first who started this organization. We also had the opportunity to send off some of our seniors who just graduated. It was a very fun, a very important event for all of us, because we got to see the alumni who are now professionals in their field, ranging from engineers to dental hygienists, people in business. And so it really motivated us current members to see how they've excelled in their fields. So here in OLAS, we strive to create a positive experience for all Latin American students here on WKU's campus through educational and social support. For example, throughout the semester we host various study sessions. We hold workshops, organizational workshops, time management, how to use a planner, things like that. We also have various guest speakers. We have our meetings on Mondays at DSU, and we have various guest speakers come. As you can see in the second picture over here, our very own, one of our very own members was presenting to us on the field of school psychology. She's a graduate student and an OLAS member. So like I said, various guest speakers come and talk to us about different educational opportunities, different career options. And we're happy for them that they come to our meetings and allow the members to see what's out there beyond college.
It's a delay switch.
So while we are all university students, we are students first, but we also believe that it is also important to have some type of social support in order to be able to keep students here and want to keep continuing their college education. And so we do provide a lot of social events. These are some of the events that we had for this year's Hispanic Heritage Month. We had all around the world, which was very, very popular. We basically had foods from all over Latin America. We had foods from Colombia, Venezuela, Mexico, just all around. We also had a very fun loteria night, which is kind of like bingo. Also one of my favorites. And then we have other like field day. We have OLAS Giving. It's just a nice way to have our members know that we are here to support you, not only in school, but in a social aspect too. These are also some more of our events. We had our carne asada, which is a cookout. We had a lot of members really enjoy that event. And then we also cleaned up the basketball stadium. That was a nice way just to make quick money. And then, also just bond while we were cleaning up. It was really, really fun actually.
Okay, so OLAS has participated in many community service activities inside and outside of campus. And here we can see 3 examples of what we have done in the community. On the far right, we see one of our members, Julio, on the Humane Society. We go there to help the staff members walk the dogs, play with the cats, and it's to give the animals a good experience, to let them know they are not forgotten, but they're gonna get out of there at some point, to feel the human touch. Another service that we do is Dueña de mi Futuro, Owner of My Future. That's a program for Latino girls from grade 6 to 12, so they can learn more about future college careers. It is hosted here on campus, and our members participating there as group leaders, facilitating the activities when people go to talk with them and to create social events for the girls while they go to every of the activities in the meantime. And the last one is Feeding America. We've helped Feeding America for many years now. We mainly help when they have food for the Hispanic community. And our members have helped setting up where the food is gonna be for the car, preparing the bags of the people, giving it to them. We have done it in the cold, in the rain, when it's hot. It doesn't matter for us. What we want to do is help our own community and help everyone else that is here on Kentucky. And that's pretty much it.
Once again, thank you very much for having us here, for giving us a chance to briefly talk about OLAS. It's an organization that's very important to all of us. We came here to Western's campus and we found this community, this family. I feel like all of us, we gravitate towards people who have common interests as us, and we found it in this organization, and we consider all of us a huge family. As mentioned before, we have educational support services here, we have social services, and we've created just one big family here. And, you know, that's why we're exec members. We want to lead, we want to show the members, give members the so thank you again for having us here.
Questions or comments for the students or for Dr. Logan?
One thing I'm struck by, I guess I was expecting to see a lot more students. And so my question would be, what should we be doing to attract more students?
I think there are a lot of us. It's just we don't always get together, like all of us, like at the same time, just because our class schedules change every semester. Some of them have late night classes. Our meetings are at 6 p.m. So some of our members actually don't have time. I think we have I think like 90 registered members. It's like 90 something registered members. They just don't all make it to meetings.
We have Regent Nichols with us, who founded the ISEC. We have Martha Sagles with us, and I wonder if you all have any comments.
I'm just really proud of the student organization. They also are leaders in the Intercultural Student Engagement Center. They assist us with our intercultural student engagement graduation celebration. With that is increased as well. So they have been able, and you all didn't mention you were able to study abroad through some funding from CJ and George, the Intercultural Student Engagement Center. So they are doing awesome things. I'm very proud of them.
And I guess from my perspective, again, I think so highly of what Dr. Sales has been able to put in place, but I was aware that when we think about ISEC, and I think most of us think of it as, it really is probably dominant for African-American students, that she's done a great job expanding that and bringing in the Latino population with us. So pretty excited that we can do more, because what I just heard is exactly what CJ and I envisioned in the beginning, was how do we create the social support, which is so important, because there's so many other programs that will help them academically and so forth, and you can still incorporate that in, but feeling that belonging is really important to us. And so it was great to hear from the students.
And to pick up on Chair Bale's comment, what we've managed to do during the past 5 years is essentially double the number of Latin American studying students on our campus. We know this is the fastest growing demographic in the nation. We know in our region, they're an important part of our community, and certainly in Nashville as well. And so what we want to ensure we're doing, that as we grow those students participating as Hilltoppers, we want to make sure that they find their people wherever they are. And so we are ever more diverse, with over 21% now students of color in the undergraduate population. And for us to be successful, we got to make sure that everybody has the supports they need, not just to get here, but to get through and leave with a degree. And so congratulations on the great growth in the organization. Francisco Serrano was one of the folks that I first met when I was here, and was a leader on campus. And I was so thankful for the guidance that Francisco gave to me when I arrived as president. And we've continued to help really grow the organization, and you all should be very proud of the work. So congratulations.
Double it again. Triple, quadruple.
Thank you so much for being here. You're thanking us for allowing you to be here. We can't tell you how much we appreciate you being here this morning. It's good for us to be able to hear from you.
Thanks to these students and to their faculty advisor, Fabian Alvarez, who has done some great work supporting that group. This is the epitome of what a student organization should be. It's both educational, it's supportive, it's social, and it is a great way to spend time together. And so it's a wonderful organization in our student organization cadre, and it's great to have the opportunity to work with these students to bring them here today. So thank you. Thank you.
I think it's always good to have that we can, because after all, that is our focus. And Dr. Tabania certainly agreed with you on the faculty as well. It's very interesting. I hope we do continue that. Chair, that concludes mine.
Well said. Thank you, Chair Thomas. Does anybody need a break? Good. Okay, we'll plow on then and go to the executive committee, whose members are with us today. First item on it has to do with the athletic employment contract for our head women's basketball coach. We have with us today, and Todd, any comments?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I can actually address both of these at the same time if the board is okay with this. As we've discussed before, when you go into the final year of a contract, that's not an overall healthy situation. It creates a lame duck status and makes it more difficult to do your job. And I think specifically in coaching, it's used against them in recruiting. So in both these instances, these two would be going into the final year of their contract. We all pay attention to everything going on in college athletics. It's an arms race in a lot of respects. There's some crazy things going on. Certainly some things that we would never do, that nor should we ever do. But that being said, I do think that when you have really good people who are doing a good job, you need to acknowledge that. And what these two addendums do with these two is it's largely an extension of their existing contract under the current terms, with a few minor tweaks that take care of them and reward them for success moving forward, such as conference championships. They both feel very good about it. And if you were to approve this, it positions each of them very well for success as we move forward.
Good. Questions, comments? Andrea, are we okay putting both these items together?
Yes.
Anybody have an objection to doing that? If there are no comments, I'll entertain a motion for approval of committee item 1 and 2 for the head women's and men's basketball.
So-
That motion, second from Regent West. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Thank you very much, Todd.
Mr. Chair, before we proceed, there's some people on this end of the table who would like to take a break before we go to some of these.
Well, this would be a good time. So how about, let me see. 10 o'clock on the nose. 8 minutes. 10:08. Gavel drops. now turn our attention to items. And we'll leave that off with President Boney on an update on Conference USA.
Chair Bell, I'm pleased to report that Conference USA is in good shape. For those of you who recall last year at about this time, we have received word at the conference that there were 16 departing to the American conference. And in the few weeks after that, there were 3 schools that departed to the Sun Belt, which left Conference USA with 5 schools. You need 6 for an automatic qualifier, and really more than that to be a viable conference. When that happened, I was appointed chair because I was vice chair, and we worked hard to secure 4 additional members of Conference USA. And so you recall we added New Mexico State, Sam Houston State University, Jacksonville State University, which is in Alabama, not Florida, and Liberty University to get us to 9. And then there were some schools that expressed an interest in joining Conference USA. The conference also has a list of schools that we are interested in pursuing. And so once we got to 9, we said we would pause and do some work quietly behind the scenes to grow the conference if we thought that was a good idea. There was also always a possibility that we could stay at 9. In the process of media conversations with potential media partners, it became pretty clear that 10 was where we should go. And so we had heard from some institutions, and you may hear some of this in the local media, or if you pay attention to social media or any of the athletics chat boards. There was an in-state institution that was interested in EKU, and I think the conference was thankful for their interest. But we had other institutions that we were talking with as well. And just last week, Kennesaw State received approval from the Georgia Regents to join Conference USA. And some folks have asked me, either in a public way or privately, why it is Kennesaw State was the choice and not EKU. And as much as I appreciate what our good colleagues in Richmond are doing, the Kennesaw State is a terrific addition because they are in a fast-growing area and of the country, just outside of Metro Atlanta. They have 40,000 students. So an institution of great strength in terms of their student demographics. Number 3, their athletics budget already puts them in the middle of the pack of Conference USA. And so there really was no other institution that was on the conference's list of potential additions that brought that kind of institutional strength, commitment to athletics. And we were very pleased to add them just last week. And so we are at 10 schools now. If you asked me what's the likelihood of going to 12, I think that is a possibility. But I think we're comfortable today at 10. The membership committee of the conference will continue to work on potential additions. But we're focused today, or now as a conference, on really finalizing a new media rights agreement. And what we've heard, and what our athletic director has heard from our fans, is we want a simpler way to find games, and we would prefer to have more TV exposure on linear channels. And so I think what you're gonna see in the coming weeks as we finalize the agreement with our media partners is hopefully more linear exposure for the conference and for our teams. I think you're going to see a simplified way to find our games, and you're going to see an increase in exposure, an increase in coverage, and also an increase in the platform. And so more news to come in the weeks ahead, but pleased for us that we are in a conference that is stable, that is bringing in teams that have a record of success athletically, and will add additional stability to the work that we're doing You can imagine if we were to go to 12, that would create an opportunity probably for divisions. So 6 schools in the east, 6 schools in the west, instead of playing just as a single division as we're doing now. But very pleased that we're at this point. It has taken a tremendous amount of work on the part of the conference staff, the executive committee, the membership committee, but pleased with the work that they've all done to get us to this place. And so for those of you at this time last year who were concerned about our conference affiliation, I would say the best is yet to come.
Thank you, Mr. President. Comments? Todd, you want to take a minute to crow a little bit about our performance in Conference USA?
Actually, what I'm going to crow about, and I've said this publicly, so it's not the first time I've said it, but as the chair of the Conference USA Executive Committee, when everything hit the fan, so to speak, last fall, he was not the chair, he was not the president, and the president of North Texas was. And then they left the league and he left his chairmanship. And then President Cavoni, essentially, to use a sports analogy, it was the equivalent of somebody saying, okay, the bases are loaded, there's nobody out, there's 3 balls and no strikes on the batter. Can you come in now and pitch and get us out of this inning? That's really what he got asked to do. And so his report just illustrated everything that's happened in the last year. But this conference was very fortunate that he was on deck to be the chair, because if that was not the case, I think we would be having a very different conversation today. I truly believe that. But where we are today is good. I mean, I think the conference is in much better shape today than it was a year ago. There are people that want to be in the league. You know, it's not a dying league. It's a league that people see as an opportunity. Really what we have to do, I think from a competitive standpoint, our league will be good, than maybe better than what some people think. The newness of the schools it's incumbent upon all of us to educate our fans about the schools that are coming in, because our fans won't be familiar with them, but they will be successful. With us, our goals don't change. I mean, we've dominated Conference USA since we've been in it, and we don't plan on that changing. Our goals don't change, but I do think there is reason for excitement and optimism moving forward.
I think we've won more championships than anybody in Conference USA, and I think it's worth pointing out that those that bolted for the American Conference, that was driven by media, and they were all from large metropolitan areas.
Right, that was their strategy. We've won 36 conference championships since we entered Conference USA. The next closest school is won 28. And what's really nice about that is 12 different sport programs have participated in that. So it's been an across the board success. It really is pretty unique. And I think it just speaks to our coaches and our athletes and what they've been able to do.
Any comments? Thank you. All right. We have with us Dr. Buddy Steen from our innovation campus. Buddy, welcome. We'll put you on the stage, President Cavoni.
Just a couple of introductory comments. Those of you who will recall at my investiture, which is ever longer ago these days, I guess 4.5 years ago, we announced four important initiatives, 2 of which are complete-ish. The Commons at Helm Library, the first-year village. We continue to work on the Opportunity Fund. And the 4th was the creation of a true innovation campus for our university. And we had the great good fortune of Buddy Steen returning to the university. And in the past year and a half, he has done some tremendous work at building partnerships, elevating the visibility of the campus, and really transforming it into what we all aspire for it to be. And that's a hub that attracts people to Bowling Green, that supports innovation and entrepreneurship, and really creates a place here in Bowling Green that's the connective tissue between the major markets of Nashville and Louisville, but does it in a way that's good for South Central Kentucky's economy. So Buddy's leadership has been outstanding, and I'm glad for you to hear all the different things that he's been able to accomplish with his team in the past year or so.
Before I start, I really want to say how thankful we are to you.
You're the founder of the Innovation Campus. You know, that allows us to do these fun, wonderful things. And thank you all too, Board of Regents, for your leadership. I mean, leadership is the critical piece that allows these things to happen. Without it, it's over. Susan, my boss, Susan Howard, the whole SOF team. No joke, that's super important. So let's do a what real quickly, just kind of remind everybody Innovation Campus, kind of why, and then how the recent house. Of course, everything's WKU branded. Create is a group that we formed. It's a 501c3. It's the economic development core. These guys, when we put our hats on Create, we're thinking about central region ecosystem for arts, technology, and entrepreneurship. And that's kind of a serious combination of things. Okay, we'll get to that a little bit later. Kentucky Innovation, which is a cabinet for economic development group, they fund the Create group for more kind of an entrepreneurial ecosystem development. So we get funding there. The Bowling Green Area Chamber of Commerce is a full partner. The Center for Research and Development, this is the building, right? That sits on the corner of Nashville Road and Camp Lane. There's an accelerator in there, which is a really, really big program, allocated space where companies can actually start in 300 square feet and continue to grow. And I'll show you a picture about that in a minute. But that's sort of physical infrastructure used to start companies in Bowling Green and keep them here so they don't head south. The Research Foundation is really more of the fiscal core of the Innovation Campus. And that's a whole bunch of people, okay, with Western. If you were to invent something like Rachel did, okay, then that IP, that intellectual property, will ultimately filter down into the Research Foundation. And it's our responsibility to either spin off a company, which we really like to do, like Rachel's doing, starting her own company and license that tech, or license it out and create revenues. ARTP is the Applied Research and Technology Program at Western, and that's pretty much all the tech at the university. 95% of all the equipment and applied tech is through that ARTP program. And there's one missing icon. I was talking to Dr. Terrence Brown earlier on here. We haven't created one yet, but there's an intimate relationship between the Potter College and the application of that Potter College talent and the Innovation Campus. And I'll tell you why that's important in just a minute. The magic that makes all of that work is alignment. And I'm serious. It is all about that. The ecosystems die from misalignment. And quite frankly, a lot of these entities don't naturally align. So we have to, our responsibility is to make sure that happens. And there is precision alignment right now in Bowling Green. And it's one of the reasons why we are continuing to grow. One of the fastest growing cities and with universities right at the core of all that. But that alignment is fantastic right now. The why is because you told us to. Okay, this is your strategic plan. Okay, you know, we pay attention. The regional lighthouse, regional provide resources, attract talent, nurture our intellectual capital. Those are brilliant concepts and apropos right now for sure. You know, quality of life regionally. We'll talk about that in a minute. Well, actually, the very definition of economic development, the way we see it, is proactive, organized actions locally to increase the overall standard of living, both economically and culturally. And in order to attract talent in this region, it's a kind of a different game now. Like 20 years ago, when I did this before, you could have a great company and a job, and the talented folks would take it. Today, you have to have a place where talented people want to be and live. And then, oh, by the way, thank you for a great job. And that's, it sounds funny, but it's really true. So we focus a lot on how do we make Bowling Green and our entire region, all of these places where these talented people want to be. And then we'll also get the companies because of it. And I'll tell you about some programs that we created that are world scale at the Innovation Campus to do that very thing. Investing in the future, inspiring individuals. This was your all's thing. All of the strategies in the Regional Lighthouse, we do every day. That's what we do every single day. Our mission is kind of the tough one. Transform existing facilities. We have a $50 million facility out there in that old mall. Is a $50 million old mall. Center for Research and Development. We reinvent programs when we need to, and we want to gather innovative intellectual capital. That's talent. That's the key. So everything really you'll see is kind of centralized on that. And if you do that, it will create meaningful corporate engagement. And corporate, when we say that, that's the highest and hardest. That includes all private sector, all businesses, and startups included. When we do that, we will have university faculty, staff, and students working alongside those businesses. Rachel's a great example of a company that was inspired. We've got a couple of other companies that the WKU RF spins off, and that's Innovation Campus. And those opportunities and jobs are created because of that. So you have to kind of put all that together to create that ecosystem so that you really do have opportunities and jobs for our students, for our alumni to come back, and I'll tell you about a really cool one in a minute about that. Another thing that Dr. Kobani did, not only founding the Innovation Campus, but corporate engagement in a meaningful way could not be more strongly said and done than something that you started. You started with Dr. Kobani and Mike Beckerton and Logan Aluminum got together, and they said, we want to create kind of a metals cluster. That was a year or so, or maybe two ago. It was a long, thick time coming, but we just launched this thing. These are 8 of the biggest metal companies in Kentucky across the entire state have come together. They formed something called a Metals Innovation Initiative. This is a cluster that's headquartered, of course, at the WKU Innovation Campus. And it's essentially the physical manifestation of the Innovation Campus. All of its pillars of existence are pillars of our existence. So we're going to do more of that. So thank you for that. So here's a kind of the map of things. Things have changed. We don't have any more retail. The Big Lots folks are no longer there. But get this, instead of the Big Lots in there, Holly Inc. just installed their research and development center in there. They're creating sustainability engineering projects. This is not, they're designing it from scratch, and they're working with our students. By the way, students are ubiquitous through everything. I don't even say it because they're involved in everything. They have a sustainability engineering program at Holly, and they approached us to make sure that WKU engineering is plugged into that. And of course, that happens. The rest of the space, I don't really have time to go too much. This accelerator space is in the back. I invite you to come and see this. There's something I wanted to talk about, and that's the collaborative smart space. And that is, this is an initiative that is bringing people from the world into what we're doing. I mean, no kidding. We have a recycling consortium that we're working with Jennifer Tugas, and that's starting to form. That's going to happen. That's in the process. MIT is partnering with WKU and the Potter College. We created an open documentary lab, and get this, the person that was selected as the first fellow was just inducted into the New York Blues Hall of Fame. Not only playing, but writing about it. He's a prolific author. He's a prolific blogger. And if you came to our collaborative smart space, which is in 30,000 square feet of that facility, you could meet him. Very, very interesting fellow. We just formed a workforce innovation lab. Workforce innovation lab is really important because the programs that we're piloting there are the kind of programs that unlock that talent from the workforces that are already out there. And I'll kind of go through very quickly what may be my most favorite. And this is a confidential living database of talent. This is a collaboration between Potter College, the students, Mark Simpson, which kind of bridges both, Dr. Simpson, myself, Sam Ford. And what we've done is we've created a website where friends and family and folks that know of people that have left the region, alumni that have left the region for meaningful employment, can confidentially communicate their talent and capabilities into that database. When I say confidential, we all sign NDAs. This one doesn't go on the internet. Okay, when you put your name in that database, when we have opportunities, and maybe we will even create some because of it, we're going to bring them home. So we've had some brain drain going on for 20 years, but that amplifies the impact of that program that we created. And it's all about talent. When Envision, AESC, who's spending $2 billion to build a plant, heard about that database, they became tenants at the Innovation Campus. The number one guy that's building the plant, you could meet him if you went to the collaborative smart space. when Logan Aluminum heard about that database, tenants at the collaborative smart space, they just tripled their occupancy there. So again, this is the meaningful corporate engagement focused on talent. There's a lot more, but thank you so much.
Comments? George, I know you've got something to say.
I'm just trying to figure out how to invest.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's really exciting. And all the things that he's shared are things that I hear and see across the country. So it's great to see that happening right there at WKU.
Research Triangle 30 or 40 years ago comes to mind. And
Yep.
what it's done to that. We do have demographics on our favor in this particular thing because America is moving to the Sun Belt.
Yep.
Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, and North Carolina have trees and water, and we don't have hurricanes.
We may have tornadoes, but we don't talk about Let me add just a bit of complex too. I'm so thankful that nothing screams innovation campus like a Big Lots. I'm kidding. And I remember one of the conversations that I had early in my tenure around that space was, why do we have that? What are we doing? Why is that there? And we needed a revenue stream. Like, well, great, let's create a revenue stream that's not Big Lots, because it just doesn't speak to the mission of the space. And so that symbol of that transition really is a pivot for the entire complex. And we have some work to do, some additional investment to be made to actually make it look like what we aspire for it to look like. And we're going to work on that in the coming couple of years. But for us as an institution, to do what we want to do on the research side of the house, for us to grow for our portfolio, last year grew from $14 to $16 million in research. We want to double that in the coming 5 years. And Ranjit's probably never, I'm looking over my shoulders, so he's sweating it. So to go from 16 to $32 million in research is going to require exactly what you heard today. As an applied research institution, we have no aspirations to be an R1, but we do have aspirations for R2 status. And that means work that is applied, that's connected to companies, and that involves students in the research. But also, if you think about the opportunities ahead at the federal level, and Senator McConnell was very helpful in this, the CHIPS Act that was signed in August to help around technology manufacturing. If you dig into that, there is a bucket of money in the tens of billions of dollars that is restricted to emerging research institutions. That's us. And so all of this work positions us to do that, elevates the aspirations of our faculty to be able to go after those investments. And then I think the last thing this does for our institution, it really changes our sights for who we are. We have the infrastructure in place. We're growing the partnerships. There are funds available to us. And as we continue to transform our faculty, the expectation around sponsor research and the support for those who are going to do that is going to be ever more important. So really pleased with this where we are. You all know we're in the halfway point of our strategic plan, and during the next 5 years, we're going to talk ever more about innovation, research, and sponsored research. Thank you, Bert.
Buddy, your enthusiasm is palpable.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you. Okay, it is almost Halloween. I've been assured we don't have any apparitions in this room by Pamela, but she's gonna tell us a few places on campus where we need to be wary. A few. Pamela served on this board for a number of years. I had the pleasure of serving with her. She was a great staff regent. and it's nice to have her back with us today in a different role.
Well, thank you for having me, and I will say, I'm gonna start my timer so I make sure. I know I'm the last thing between you all and freedom for the day. So. Sure. And I've chose not to do any PowerPoint or anything because I'm just going to talk. And you know, as we're gearing up for Nightmare on Normal Street for our homecoming, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is about the ghost stories on campus, because I know I've talked to some people who had a lot of experiences, some people who've worked here for years and go, I never knew this was going on. But given the time, I'm only going to limit it to the 3 buildings that were featured in the Ghost Hunters episode. I don't know. Yes.
Not my office, right?
I was getting ready to say, I am purposely going to avoid Craig Administrative Center, which would be on my ghost tour if I was doing a ghost tour. Can I at least talk about that?
Okay. Sure.
Because not one, but 2 presidents died in that building. It was the original.
That's 20% of our presidents.
I'm not sure why, but the 3rd president did move out. But there was the original president's home, so, but we won't get into that one. So the Ghost Hunter show, actually, if you're familiar with that, so you may have seen it, did come to campus. They focused on 3 buildings, Van Meter, Potter, and Schneider Hall. Van Meter and Potter and the former Barnes Campbell, probably some are more well-known ghost stories. But a little bit to go with that, if you've heard about Van Meter, you may have heard about that there was a worker killed during construction. It was built in 1911, and he was on the roof looking for an airplane and fell through the skylight and died. And that's actually not true. There's no documentation on that. However, what actually happened was in 1918, there was a student named Henry Clegg from Alabama who was at the Bowling Green Business University. And he and a group of other students had somehow got on the roof of Van Meter. And they weren't just looking for airplanes, they were looking for the first airplane to fly into Warren County. Lieutenant Bloodworth was flying in from Memphis. He was going to be doing some shows for the Warren County Red Cross Fair. So unfortunately, he was looking up at the sky. He did fall through the skylight and was fatally injured. He did not die, he died in St. Joseph Hospital. But you know, in the 1960s, we had a student who was in a play production. They were doing a play. He's sitting in the dressing room in Van Meter. He's the last one there. He's taking off his makeup and he's looking in the mirror and he sees somebody standing behind him, kind of leaning down with their face close to his shoulder. And he said he was middle-aged, had really stark features and kind of a blue glow around him. And so he turned around to see who was there. When he turned around, there wasn't anyone. So pretty soon he wasn't there either. But don't be mistaken that these are old stories as well, because in 2017, because these are still going, there was a young man who worked for Aramark, which several of you in here would know if I said the name. And in fact, he used to cater the Board of Regents meetings back in the day. But he was working, they had catered an event for a concert in Van Meter. And everyone had left and he's gathering up everything and he's got a cart and he's going, if you're familiar with Van Meter, the top hallway behind on the 2nd floor, and he's headed towards the elevator. And he looks down and he sees a man sitting in the auditorium. And he's like, that's weird, nobody's supposed to be here. And he can see him well enough to know it's a man and he's dressed, he's of a different time period. He had a string tie on, an older style clothing. And he's like, well, I guess he's waiting for somebody. So he turns away just for a second. He takes a step or two and he says, well, maybe I should make sure that he doesn't need any help or something. And so he turns back around and he's gone. He said, now where he's standing up there and the man was sitting in the auditorium, he could see pretty much the whole area. And there was no way for him to have gotten out of that seat and completely out of the building, out of that auditorium in the 2 or 3 seconds that he had looked away. So he decided it was time for him to go too. He hurriedly left. Potter Hall is another one that's one of our more well-known. It was originally a women's residence hall. And my My apologies to those who work in Potter Hall. I can't give everybody a break. So, and the stories that I'm telling you are stories that I've gotten firsthand. I've been interviewing people. I've interviewed about 80 people so far for research in a book that I'm doing. So they're the firsthand. This isn't something that somebody, you know, an urban legend or somebody said or something. I have the names of these people. I talked to them. They're firsthand what they experienced. So Potter, sadly, there was a young woman who had passed away in 1979, and everyone attributes the hauntings activity to that event. And so when someone was sitting there, a gentleman is working late one night, and he's sitting there and he hears footsteps. It sounds like someone walking down the hall towards his office, but the motion sensor lights don't come on, and he doesn't see anybody, but he really feels like somebody's walking up towards him. And he's sitting there, and all of a sudden he hears a voice say, "Go." And he looks at the clock, and it's 7:56. And apparently she doesn't want you there after 8 o'clock. Until 8 o'clock, well, no, that's not true either. But after 8 o'clock. And he was braver than most. He said, "I'm finishing an email. When I get through, I will leave." And he did. One of my favorite stories from Potter is there was a gentleman who worked here, and he was working really late one night. We have dedicated staff, Dr. Cabana. They worked late. And he's telling me that there's no such thing as ghosts. You know, it's fun to talk about in October, especially this time of year with our homecoming and everything. But there's no such thing as ghosts. How can anybody believe in ghosts? And this isn't about whether or not you believe or not. These are just the stories that happen. But absolutely, there's no such thing as ghosts. But he worked in Potter, and he said, "But there was this one night." And he said, I don't know how to explain it. And he said he'd gone to the restroom and got a drink of water, and he heard footsteps coming down the hall. And of course, the hall kind of has some angles to it. And not just footsteps, but he heard like somebody had keys in their pocket and they're jingling their keys. And he's like, he calls out, he said, "Hey, don't let me scare you, because it's just me, and you know, I'm here working late." No answer. Footsteps get closer, still hears the keys jingling. "Hey, it's me," calls out again. No answer. Finally, they're like really close. He's like, "Don't let me run it. You know, it's me. Don't let me scare you." And he goes around the corner and he hears the footsteps go past, and there's nobody there. He did not work that late after that. But again, he absolutely does not believe in ghosts, but he just can't explain how that happened. Personally, I started my career, I worked there for over 25 years and started as a police officer. And so when I was showing a young police officer around in the middle of the night during a break in Potter Hall, it was still Residence Hall, we actually did hear a noise ourselves that we went to investigate. You know, somebody's in a room, what's going on? And we go down the hall, we identify the room, and as I'm getting my keys off my belt, we hear this metallic sound. What was that? He said, "I saw that. What was it?" And it had the round doorknobs, and the round doorknob, we stood there with the flashlight on it because it's the middle of the night, and the doorknob just moved. And we're like, okay, somebody's in this room. So we throw the key in the door and we go in. There's nobody there. Windows secure, no breeze, nothing to account for the noises that we've heard coming from the room or the doorknob moving. Like, yep, time for us to go too. So the last building that I'll talk about, Snyder Hall. It actually is an urban legend. If you've not heard the story of Snyder, it was during a break back in the 40s or back in some time or back a long time ago. And two women had stayed behind after the break, and so they're alone in the building, and they've been warned not to go out. One of them goes out, gets something to eat. She's coming back. Someone had escaped from an insane asylum, and they climbed up the stairwell, the fire escape. They'd broken in, and they had an axe, and he starts killing her. And she screamed for help, and the other girl's too terrified to open the door. And of course, this was long before phones in the room, much less cell phones or anything. So she's there until the next morning it gets light and things are quiet, and she opens the door, and she either finds the girl dead with the axe in her head or finds the blood there and she's gone. It varies. That exact story, almost verbatim, is in a book on urban legends. You will find it every university campus. While we can document several tragic things that happened, that one we cannot. But that doesn't mean that things don't still happen in that building. And I'll circle back to that real quick too. But, you know, police department responds to a 911 call from a room when the building was empty prior to being converted to the Gatton Academy. They get there, I said, there's nobody there, the room's empty. While they're standing there, they get a 911 call from another room, a couple doors down. They go, there's nobody there. They pick up the phone and call, hey, are we in the right location? Yeah, that's it. That's where the call is coming from. At one point, they are actually in a room and they dispatch says, hey, we're getting a 911 call from this room. Like, we're in that room. There's nobody here. So they left, and as soon as they got outside the door, the sergeant said, come back in with me a second, to the other officer, and said, I want to check something out. And the first room they went to, where the call that originally came from, it didn't even have a phone. So you might could say, well, that's the phone lines or something. But wasn't the only thing that's happened there. Some people from EH&S were over there one time, again, while it was under construction, checking on some things, and they had those big barrel fans to improve circulation in a certain area, and they were in there, and all of a sudden the first fan goes off, then the second fan goes off, then the third fan goes off. I'm like, why is that? If it was a breaker, they would all go off, they check the breaker, everything was fine. They go check on something else, the light above them goes out. And the gentleman I was talking to, he said, at that point he looked around, his colleague was gone. He's like, well, I go back. He said, I decided to leave too. So those are just a few of the stories. But again, the things that we think we know, nothing happened in that building, but there are still unexplainable events. Are y'all familiar with the history of Vinegar Hill? I know Dr. Bellis, he's heard me speak on this, but Vinegar Hill was the original name for our hill. It's actually had several names, but Vinegar Hill was the most prominent. Charles Jones, who founded Jonesville, actually talked about the hill itself being haunted in the 1800s. There was it was a bad part of town, and there were a lot of things that went on. There were murders, there were suicides, and there were things like that went on. And so in paranormal stories, we talk about maybe it's not the building, but it could be the land itself. So, you know, what could have happened? Because, you know, an 18-year-old died in Van Meter or was fatally injured there, but it's a middle-aged man or an older gentleman they see. Potter Hall, they claim that, you know, the young lady who died in 79, but I've interviewed several alumni who said, no, that building was haunted before 1979. They would hear a piano playing in the lobby at night. And if you look at original photos, you'll see a piano in the corner. So bringing in, and one of the reasons I'm passionate about this, and the dean left from Potter, bringing in sociology, I have to bring in sociology. There was a gentleman, Bergman, who's got a theory focusing on local narratives. So these are our stories, and you can't tell a ghost story without learning more about the place, without learning more about the organization and the history. And you're sharing these stories with other people and bringing them together because of those stories. So it's important to do that. I mean, you know, there was a lot of history, if you think back what I just talked about, a lot of history interwoven in those stories, and it has to be that way. So that's why I find it exciting. And I think, well, I could talk for a long time. I'll sum it up best. Again, not about whether you believe in ghosts or not, but there's an excellent quote from a former hall director of Barnes Campbell. And he said, he was quoting the Herald one year, he said, I don't believe in ghosts, but having lived in that building, I believe in unexplainable events. So if you're interested, I can talk all day on this stuff, but anyway, thank you for having me and letting me share a little bit of the ghost stories as we gear up for our Nightmare on Normal Street. And hopefully there will not be any nightmares. I know anybody wants to talk about Craig Administrative Center without the president, I'll be glad to talk. Any questions?
Emily, you want to talk about the book you're working on. So one of the things that we discussed several months ago is a potential quote for the book jacket, but it's a compilation of all these stories in one place that you've been working on for a couple of years now.
4 years.
4 years. Plus COVID, yeah, they're good.
Yeah, plus COVID. Well, I can still do it because I interviewed by phone and so COVID didn't slow me down, but yeah, 4 years, like I said, I've interviewed about 80 people and several have multiple stories because they're housing and residence life who will actually live in residence halls and have histories. I've got stories from 2020, 2021, 2022. Barnes Campbell did not go out without some last minute things going on before it went down. So
Family, I appreciate the stories. We're not going to put you on the recruitment team for the university.
We're not ready to change our motto to the spirits.
now all universities have ghost stories. I will say we have more, but it's our oral history that I'm trying to capture and document. So.
Thank you, Tamara. It's great to have you in this room again.
Thank you. Good to see you.
We have one other item which President Pavoni is.
I move that the board go into closed session as provided in KRS 61.810, section 1, for the purpose of discussing proposed or pending litigation